Welcome to Captain Forest podcast Hero's Voice. Captain Forest is an international movement for a plastic-free, waste-free and permaculture world.
I would say if you want to change the whole system, you cannot change it as a whole. If we can go step by step, I am a person of the step-by-step process. Let's make conventional agriculture disappear and move towards at least conservation agriculture, which has some default, but also a lot of quality. Organic agriculture, holistic grazing system. Just do a little bit of that. We will save a lot of money. We will save a lot of forest. We will store carbon in the soil. We will have less impact on biodiversity, less impact on the climate change, and so on and so on. And people will have the impression that their life didn't change.
So if you had to advise countries or governments, what steps should they take to transition from conventional agriculture to agroecology? Hello everyone, welcome to Hero's Voice by Captain Forest. Today we are happy to welcome Paul Luu. He's Executive Secretary at the 4P1000. It's an initiative launched during COP21 that aims at ensuring global food security and storing carbon in the soils. Agriculture has been a fundamental human activity for thousands of years, providing us with the food and fiber that we need to survive and thrive. However, as agricultural practices have become more industrialized and intensive, they have also had significant negative impacts on our environment. From soil degradation and water pollution to greenhouse gas emissions and biodiversity loss, conventional agriculture is a major contributor to the global environmental crisis we face today. Today, we want to understand together the impacts of conventional agriculture, the different sustainable agricultural practices, and the steps countries should take to transition from conventional agriculture to agroecology. So hi, Paul, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much, Lamia. I'm very, very honored to be with you today. I'm Paul Luu. I am an agronomist. First of all, I'm sorry I'm French, so my English is a little bit broken, but I will try to do my best. And my specialty when I was working in the field was about agroforestry, mainly in tropical area. So I spent most of my career a little bit everywhere in the world. And now for 6 years, I'm working for the 4P initiative, which is an initiative launched at Paris at COP21 in 2015. And the main subject of the initiative is to promote carbon sequestration in soil through change in agricultural practices in order to fight climate change and to improve food security.
What is conventional agriculture, and can you share with us a story?
Conventional agriculture is a result of years and years of work of humanity trying to solve the problem to get food and biosourced product. In fact, all started with the agricultural activity developed by the humanity and human beings when they start thinking that it would be easier to get all what they need close to their room, their houses, instead of going in the forest, hunting and picking and fishing. But of course, during years and centuries, agricultural practice evolved very slowly, with starting with the work, the tillage of the soil, then the fact to keep the seeds from one season to another, and improving the way to protect the crops, protect the animals, make the difference between the pasture and the cropland, and so on, and develop some forest system or agroforestry system for some other part of the world. Then I would say last century, during the 60 to 70 years of the last century, everything really accelerate. And with the mechanization, all the power given to the human being with the engine, and also all the possibility about the chemical knowledge, the using some molecules to protect the crops, the knowledge about how soil fertility is providing elements to the plant and so on, the water management and so on. So agriculture developed in a very very strong scientific way, leading to what we call today the conventional agriculture. Conventional agriculture is mainly organized around a very fair tillage. I mean, all the work around the soil. Soil is considered more as, I would say, an inert support that you need to work to put the seeds in, to remove all the weeds. So the tillage, all the work done on the soil are the first part. The second part is the improvement of all the seeds and all the animals that are devoted to the agriculture. This is the genetic improvement, of course, selection, use of GMOs and so on. So this is really how we can have the best of the best to get the better product. But the problem is that if you have the best seeds and the best variety, most of the time, you need to have a very precise, a very high nutrient input. And so it is why you are using mineral fertilizer, you are using agrochemical to protect your crop or to protect your animals. So most of the time, those very productive variety are also the most demanding in terms of input. So altogether, all of that is the conventional agriculture. So now we know that we can produce a lot on any kind of land, knowing the soil analysis and so on. But also we discover during the, I would say, the last 40 years, that all this way of doing agriculture has also a negative impact on the environment, and also a negative impact on the quality of the product, and also could have a negative impact on human health and animal and plant health. So now we have the good aspect and the bad aspect. The good aspect is that thanks to globally the development of this conventional agriculture, we have enough food to feed the whole humanity, almost, even though 900,000 people are still suffering from undernutrition. But we can consider that as the global population of the world is increasing, this part of the population suffering from undernutrition remain globally the same, and we can consider that we are feeding more people than in the previous year. And this is largely thanks to the conventional agriculture. But we have a large negative impact on our environment. And it's important also to understand that due to the fact that agriculture is an activity that is developing most of the time on forests that are deforested, on land that they were used naturally before, and now they are artificialized by agriculture. So producing food and biosourced product will definitely have an impact on the nature and on the environment. The question is which level of damage we can afford without putting the whole balance of the planet, of the environment of the planet, in danger or not. And also humanity as well, because we need also natural resources as well. So this is the large question. This is from where the conventional agriculture is coming from. This is what it is. And this is the challenge we are facing at the moment for now several decades.
Okay, thank you. Can we consider that traditional agriculture is the one that existed before the Industrial Revolution, and that the conventional agriculture is the one that started with science?
We can consider that, even though there are still people working with traditional agriculture, and also traditional agriculture included in the background some aspects of the conventional agriculture. If you have a traditional farmers somewhere on earth that have access to some mineral fertilizer or some improved seeds, they will use it. Even though they are doing maybe not plowing, they will use their own manual tools. But if they will have access to those improved inputs, they will use it. Most of the time, what prevents them to use it is the cost and the fact that they cannot afford it, and they try to cope with what they have and the level of their production. But I don't like to oppose too much traditional and conventional. It's the boundary is not so obvious sometimes, but we need to keep the best from both to improve the whole system anyway.
Okay, so for the positive impact, the objective was to produce food in a large quantity, and conventional agriculture have been successful in doing it because they also employed industrial ways to produce food, and they have been able to do it at a very large scale and decrease also uncertainty.
And the cost.
And the cost, decrease uncertainty and cost. So these are the positive impacts of conventional agriculture. Can you explain again what are the negative impacts?
Well, the thing is that we can concentrate on those positive impact, but something also came from the positive impact is that in some country or some region, there were more and more food or more and more grain and food and feed. And so people decided that they need to use those production to feed the animals, because also the protein coming from animal production were also very expensive. And so we need to decrease the price of those. And so producing poultry, producing pork, pigs, producing cattle, milk was one of the main objectives, to use those feed coming from the agricultural overproduction, I would say. And doing so, we just going in a way that we were producing more and more grain to feed the animals. And we know that the animals are not the best way to use all the energy put in the grain, because they will lose a lot. And the human being who will eat that meat will be not so efficient if you look for all the energy in the whole chain. So that was another aspect. And also all those animals were a negative effect on effluent, all the dungs and urines that were collected were not properly managed, and it started becoming a big problem. Well, on the negative impact of the conventional agriculture, we know now there are several consequences. One of the consequences is that all this conventional agriculture is using a lot of energy and a lot of fossil fuel to produce the tractor, the engine, to burn in the engine for having the power to till or to work in the field. Also, all the energy to produce the mineral fertilizer, urea and some others. And of course, all the energy to produce all these agrochemicals. So altogether, this is a very emitting in terms of CO2 mainly in the atmosphere. But the activity, the agricultural activity, has also some problematic in terms of emission. When you are plowing, when you are tilling a land, the soil is exposed to the oxygen of the atmosphere, and you start having an oxidation and a mineralization of all the elements. And this is emitting a lot of CO2. So that's a first point. Another one is that when you use mineral fertilizer, like the one rich in nitrogen, you will emit some N2O, which is also green effect gas. So it's important, greenhouse gas, sorry. So it's important to keep in mind the fact that CO2 is a bad thing for the atmosphere. N2O is another bad, because it's more powerful than the CO2 in terms of heating the planet. And we have also CH4, the methane, produced by the paddy field in the condition of irrigated paddy field, and also all the emission by the ruminant, the cattle, when they are burping, they emit some CH4, and CH4 is also something very bad for the atmosphere and for the climate change. So that's the main aspect, and I would say around climate. Of course, if you deforest because you want to install crops instead of a forest, you will cut the trees where the carbon is stored in the stem, in the leaves, in the soil with the roots, and you remove all of that to put some crops which contain a lot less carbon. And when you plow the land, I explained to you, you are losing carbon. So globally, the whole things, you are removing the carbon from where it was stored, and you are releasing it in the atmosphere, so which is also very bad. And of course, the forest is also producing oxygen, and it's important to have oxygen in the atmosphere for all the animals to breathe, but also vegetal. And so it means that we are losing slowly some part very important for the whole survival of the ecosystem. Of course, you are also losing a large part of the biodiversity, because the forest is the richer ecosystem in biodiversity. And when you remove it to put some conventional agriculture, you remove hundreds or thousands of species to replace by maybe one dozen of species, which is a lot poorer. And also all the natural animal, insects, birds, mammals that are living in the ecosystem disappear. You replace by some other one were more easily living in the field, in the cropland. And also, when you are working with agriculture and conventional agriculture, when you are making some selection of breeding of animals, then you make the genetic quality of the whole things decreasing, because you reduce the number of animals race, or the animal or the vegetal varieties. So you are reducing the global biodiversity. That's all those elements, and also the quality of the quality of the production, most of the time that are processed industrially before rising the consumer. The nutrition quality is lower than the one in other conditions of production. You are giving to the people some industrial product, which is not so good for the health. So, and you are making the meat, the sugar, the fat more accessible to most of the people. And this is not also a good way to feed. We need all of that in our diet, but of course, not in larger quantity, in over quantity that we need. And so the health of the whole society is also in danger. So altogether, we have good part of the conventional agriculture, but we have also bad part and negative aspects.
So to summarize the negative impacts, there are climate impacts due to GHG emissions. Then there are environmental impacts, for example, deforestation, soil erosion, and biodiversity loss. Finally, there are social impacts related to the impacts on human health. So Paul, what caused conventional agriculture to drift? It seems that it was out of control.
Well, in fact, the first drift I already explained is the fact that in some area, there were quantity of production going over the need by the people from this region, and they decided to use it more to feed animals. So the first drift was that, using a large amount of possible food for human being for feeding animals. But the idea was to decrease the price of the meat, and of course, make the people having access to those proteins at the cheaper price to improve their nutrition and their health. So it was also justified on one hand. The other thing was the development of the international trade, with the facility to transport on a long distance, with the low cost of the fossil fuel, the boat, the train, the cars, the trucks, can be used to carry on the long distance all the mineral fertilizer that were produced sometime in some other part, like in Morocco and in Argentina and some other place like that. And they can reach any farmers on Earth. So that was also facilitate those exchange. And at the end of the production process, they also facilitate the fact that you can export the grain everywhere on Earth. You can export your milk, you can export your fruits, you can export your meat. So it seems to be a huge market where everything was possible. We find out that it was not so abused before, but when the war in Ukraine started and with the pandemic also just before, we just find out that if some places get isolated due to the fact that the people need to be locked down due to the pandemic, or that are not access anymore to the production from Ukraine as grain and so on, or Russia, then the whole system is in danger. And that makes people think about the fact that maybe we should talk about, again, food sovereignty. How a state or a country or a nation being able to feed all the people, all its population. And before, it was the larger part of this was due to the international trade and movement, and you were selling plain and you purchasing grains, for instance, or whatever. And suddenly, when everything stopped, you find out that your best friend is the farmers next door. The guy you ignore up to now, or even though that you consider that he was the bad guy because he was polluting your atmosphere, polluting your soil, polluting your water, and so on. And suddenly you find out that this guy is producing food that you need because you have no more access to the food coming from the other side of the world. And things start changing. So now we are in a situation of a kind of mixture between, well, we need to find the right balance between the good side of the conventional agriculture and the bad side, but you need to produce not too far from our place, because if there is a problem on the trade, you will not be able to get all the food you used to get, and so on and so on. And you used to drink a coffee or to use cocoa or tea, which are produced in another country than where you are. So all those questions never came to the mind of most of the people in the population before. But suddenly they find out that, wow, finally, it's not so easy to feed all those people. And we need maybe to consider the way to produce all those food at the level of the earth, maybe not rely too much on trade, not rely too much on exchange, and maybe being a little bit wiser about the environment. Because when you purchase a produce in your supermarket, produce in a part of the world where they are deforesting to give you this production, this food, I mean, you just go to the supermarket, you don't even know how it is produced. But suddenly, when it disappears, you say, okay, where I can get that, how this one was produced. Then you start realizing that things are not so simple, and that you need to consider the whole things as one and not only separately.
Okay, thank you. Just a precision, those small farmers, not because they are small farmers that they use sustainable methods. Usually they use conventional, or a mix between conventional and traditional methods.
Yeah, they can use it. I mean, some of them have access to the mineral fertilizer, they have access to the agrochemical, they have access to the improved seeds and varieties. Take the example of what's happened in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, by the past year, well, there were a political will to say, okay, we will be, Sri Lanka, the first country ever to be fully organic. Okay. That was a very interesting and very, well, good objective. But it was taken at the level of the policymaker, and not only for good reason. Maybe also because importing mineral fertilizer, importing agrochemical, or importing seeds was a little bit heavy for the budget of the country. So they said, okay, doing that, we could have two objectives. First of all, reducing the charges and the expenses, and on the other side, we will become more natural. The problem is that the farmers were used to a more conventional way of producing, mainly, for instance, the paddy, the rice. And even though the size of the plot and the size of the farm, most of them are very small, they are mechanized. They were using plowing machine, they were using a harvesting machine, and so on, and using mineral fertilizer and agrochemical in their plots. And they know how to produce that way. When they stop the access of mineral fertilizer, agrochemical, and all of that to the small farmers, the farmers try to do the best with what with what they have. And suddenly the yield drops by 50, 60, 70%. Of course, the production of the country was not enough to satisfy the needs of the population. And if population have, and even the farmers have no means to purchase, to sell rice and to purchase rice that are missing in their production, well, the whole system fail, and the people starving just go back to the government and said, okay, you ask us to do so, but it was a failure, and then we have a big problem to feed the population. And it was a revolution. So we need to be very prudent with that, cautious with that. I mean, it's could be a very good objective, but this needs to be done in consultation with all the people involved, starting with the farmers, the people working in extension, people working with all the companies that are selling all the goods for the farmers, and even the companies that are selling the products of the farmers and the population. So really, this is very important to consider. You cannot decide only on one part of the whole chain. All the chain need to be involved in the decision and in the implementation of the decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a shame because it gives a bad example of, because people that are against organic agriculture just use this example to say, oh, you see, it never worked, it's a failure. It's a failure because the conditions were not there, but it could have been a success.
Can you tell us what are the existing certification for sustainable agricultural practices?
Well, there are some very well known. I mean, if you take the understanding of the agroecology that we develop in the book that we have just published, which is a continuum of practices, and organic agriculture is belonging to the agroecological approach. Organic agriculture is well known for years now for having a certification process, certification by a third party, which is very important. You have the producer, you have a list of characteristics that you need to respect, and a third party is coming to check if you are respecting those. Among those, there are not using of agrochemical synthesis, synthetic agrochemical, mineral fertilizer also in some aspects, and so on. So this is one of the most well-known all around certification on organic. Then you have a small branch of the organic, which is biodynamic agriculture, with also a certification, very important. This is another kind of organic agriculture with more link with the natural cycle, and with some recipe that are sometimes coming from, well, very difficult things to understand, but well, it works. We have a large part of the vineyard in France, for instance, under biodynamic and certified. So it's also very interesting, even though we don't know exactly scientifically how all of that works. There are also some other parts like the ROC certification, regenerative organic certification, developed in the US. Then we are talking about regenerative agriculture, which is another kind of agroecological practices and agriculture, which is more complex with the relation between the trees, the crops, the animals, and the human being also. So it starts being certifying, but it's a very small quantity of production certified by that means. We start having some certification around conservation agriculture with some initiative in various countries, but it's not really yet harmonized, I would say. Really the one which is the most harmonized certification process is the organic, that we have equivalence from one country to another. You have an international market organized around that, and this is very well organized. But we need to develop some other kind of certification if we want the consumer to have trust in the way food are produced.
So if I understand well, this biocertification exists only for organic agriculture because there are no certification for the other agroecology methods, while organic agriculture is different from agroecology.
It's not very different. Organic agriculture is belonging to the large family of the agroecology. But of course, as all the various agriculture that compose the agroecology, there is not a perfect system. And organic agriculture has some default and some quality. One of the default is the fact that people involved in organic agriculture can use soil tillage. It's not forbidden. So when you are tilling the land, as I told you before, you are losing CO2, you are losing life in your soil, and so you are losing organic matter, so you will need to bring some organic matter back to the field. So it could be the one coming from animal manure, from animal on the same farm or from the neighboring farm. It could be developing the use of mulch, of compost, and some other things coming from the same farm. But you are compensating what you are losing. Another way is that another default is the fact that you are only using natural products, natural molecules to treat your plants or your animals if you have a problem. That is why you are using a lot of quantity of copper. For instance, in the vineyard, in organic agriculture, they're using copper to fight the fungus and sometimes the bacteria. So this copper in large quantity is a natural product, but it's just a disaster for the life in the soil. So you see, all is organized around the fact that to be natural, but sometimes this leads you to some other excess and to some problem. So organic agriculture anyway is a nice step forward going out of conventional, and we need to promote it, but we need to find a way to replace some problematic molecules that we are using or some kind of practices that we're using in organic to make it more, even better than it is already, even though it's not too bad. We should say that this is not bad. I mean, it's just small default, but we need to correct those small defaults.
So we hear a lot of words like agroecology, agroforestry, permaculture, regenerative agriculture, and carbon farming. Can you help us understand each of these words? So what is what?
That's the whole purpose of the book that we produced, because there were also a large confusion in the meaning of all the people. Well, I don't want to say that we wrote through that book the truth and the other one are not in the truth. Well, you know, agroecology is a large concept, and it needs to let rooms for interpretation and the possibility to evolve. But we try to put in simple words what is agroecology. Agroecology is the way that we can get out conventional agriculture to get inspiration in the natural process and the natural functioning of the ecosystem to make our agro system more sustainable. So in clear, using nature-based solution to make our agriculture evolve in a more natural way. Well, saying that, what does it mean? We present the agroecology as a continuum of agriculture. For instance, if you take the conventional agriculture and you stop soil disturbance, so if you stop tilling the soil, you multiply, you never let your soil bare. It means that when you harvest a crop, you install the new crop or a cover crop in between the residue of the crop you harvest, without never disturbing the soil in tilling. And if you make rotational aspect, it means that you are not growing a wheat on wheat, on a maize on a maize, but after a wheat, for instance, you will put some legumes, and after the legumes, you can have some legumes like soya or some other cover crops, and then you will have some maize behind it after, and so on. So you increase the biodiversity of the whole system because you are making rotational crops. You are also putting cover crops that you can have a mixture of plants. So they have some cover crops, look like a beautiful blooming pasture, in fact, and it is very interesting for the birds, for the insects, for the small mammals, and so on. So it's you bring back life, and as you are protecting your soil, all the earthworms of the life of the soil is developing, and the earthworms are doing the work that you can do with the tillage. I mean, they are building galleries, and it helps the air and the water to come down, and all the organic matter from the top of the soil going down deeply in your soil, making your soil healthy. So when you do all of that, you are doing what we call conservation agriculture, and you are moving from the conventional agriculture. In between, you can have precision agriculture using a better part of your nutriments, of your mineral fertilizer, of your agrochemical use, and so on. Well, it's not exactly the same. But conservation agriculture do not prevent you to use mineral fertilizer if you consider to need it, to produce more organic matter, to let it in the field, to rebuild your organic matter in your soil. And if you have a problem with some insects, for instance, then you can use a little bit of chemical, or you can use some herbicides to destroy your cover crops in order to install your new crops on the residue of your cover crops. Well, this is really something which is close to the conventional, but we suppress a lot of mistakes from the conventional, and the level of the yield are very interesting. Then from that, you can also make organic agriculture. We describe, you can ban all the agrochemical, all the mineral fertilizer. Organic fertilizer will be used instead of mineral, and you can use natural products to treat your plant, but you will continue to use tillage. So you will have some default and also some quality. You have biodynamic, we explained that before. Then you can have also regenerative agriculture, which is a little bit more, you reintroduce the trees on your plot. And when I say the trees, not only on the boundary as a hedge, but you can also have tree in the middle of the plot. Well, it depends. Of course, you will not put them too close one from the other, because if not, you cannot use your tractor if you need to use it. But you introduce more and more the trees, you have more relation with animals, you have more natural pasture or permanent pasture that could help the animal to develop, relation between the animals using the feed, and also use the dung and the manure will come back to the field. Letting also the cover crops never till, also you get some good point from the conservation agriculture in your regenerative agriculture, and more family farm, I would say, more than the conventional industrial farm. That's a concept, having more interaction with human beings all around. Permaculture is a kind of regenerative agriculture. At a small scale, you associate all the plants together in one place, and then you avoid having one field with only wheat, and when the disease or the insects want to go on that field, it's very easy. All the food for them are there. But if you plant one plant of tomato over here, and then another plant and a small tree and so on in the plot, a small plot, you can mix a lot of crops like in the nature. But if one plant of tomatoes is have a disease, maybe this disease will not be able to reach the other plant of tomato, which is a few meters away, because they are not touching each other. So that's permaculture, and that's, you can also have animals in the middle and so on. So this is regenerative agriculture. If you want to breed your cattle, you can have what we call the holistic grazing system, which is a system that get inspiration from the huge herd in the large plain of North America or Africa. Well, the animals are always going in one direction, and they stayed one day on one place, they're eating, they are putting manure, dungs and urine there, and then they move, and they move, they never go back. And doing that, all the plant, the grass has enough time to regenerate, the soil also get more fertile, store carbon due to the manure, the dung, and so on. And when the animal came back the following year, they will find even better grass. and they can continue the cycle like that. So if you manage your farm, your grassland, your permanent grassland like that, you bring the animals every day in a different plot, small plot, they eat all the grass, they put some dung and so on, and you move it next door, and you come back to the same place only a few months after. Then you can be successful and store a lot of carbon in the soil, and that will compensate without any trouble all the CH4 that are emitting by the cows, and you can produce meat of a very good quality. You can produce leather for the industry, and you can also produce milk for your cheese and whatever. Lastly, I would say the one the closest to the natural ecosystem is the agroforestry system. In the agroforestry system, you make a mixture of the crops, annual, biannual, semi-perennial, perennial crops, bush, trees, so on, palm tree and whatever. So those systems are very complex. You can have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 of species, and you can have also 1, 2, 3, 5 layers. This is the one who mimic the most the forest ecosystem. And this is the one the more resilient in terms of resistance to the disease, resistance to the flood, resistance to all the elements. And this is also the most difficult to install for a farmer, because of course the trees will not have the same age than the crops there, but it can produce a lot of quantity of production. It could be medicinal, it could be cocoa, tea, coffee, it could be fruits, it could be plants like coconuts, like breadfruit that could bring also some starch to the family and so on. So it's very complex, but most of the time those are on a very small plot, or if it's on a larger plot, then you will have less diversity. It's 2 or 3 layers. For instance, you have cocoa and some plants over there, and maybe some plants behind, but most of the time you have too much shade, and so you cannot grow anything else at the level of the soil. Or you can have also an arrangement in the time. I mean, you start planting the trees while they are small. You will have banana trees, we will use the light, and under the banana trees you can have some other plants. And after 10 years, the larger tree will have more shade, and you can have another kind of crops under, like coffee and so on. So all those various agriculture, according to us, is involved in a continuum that explain what is agroecology. I'm not explaining that all those agriculture are in small boxes that are not communicating to another. Of course, you can have interaction. You can have people using organic conservation agriculture, or another one having organic regenerative agriculture, whatever. But it's interesting to find out that there are a continuum of solution for us. Of course, if you want to develop crops like wheat or maize or soya, it will be easy for people which is already working in conventional to develop some conservation agriculture plot. If the people are dealing with small ruminant or poultry and so on, it could be interesting for them to be in organic, because it will be easy for them to do so. But you will have to develop some feed from organic or from regenerative agriculture. If you want to have a small family farm, or regenerative agriculture is very good. That is why most of the time the people make the confusion between agroecology and regenerative agriculture. They consider this is the same. For us, it's not exactly the same.
Okay, so
agroecology is wider.
Regroups several types.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
And finally, if you have a small plot, with your house, you can have an agroforestry system, very complex. But close to your house, you will have fruits, you will have medicinal plants, you have condiments, you will have all what you need in your life of every day. You can have some poultry going around, and it will come in complement from another plot.
Okay.
But this is the, I would say, a view, a perception of the agroecology, which is a little bit complex, but it also shows that there is not a unique solution. And all the solutions could be found in the agroecology, but they are not all the same practices.
Okay. And however, regenerative agriculture, permaculture, agroforestry, and livestock management, like developed by Alan Savory, all of them, they don't have any certification. So first, do you know why? And the fact that they don't have a certification, is it a barrier for them to scale?
Well, the problem of the certification is that it's costly. Because if you want to have a certification, you need to develop a list of characteristics that you will control, and you need to also have a certification body, a third people that will be able to certify that you are doing the right things. So all of that has a cost. If you look at the organic agriculture product sold in the shop in Europe, for instance, or in the States, they are more expensive than the conventional agriculture because you have to add this layer of certification, and the yield usually are lower than the conventional. So the product is more expensive to produce and is more expensive to certify. But we can think about kind of way to certify that the farmers are doing a good job and that they don't need to be certified by a third party. It's a kind of auto certification or certification by a third party, which is not being paid for that, but give the information to the society. We can imagine that if a farmer is involved in conservation agriculture, as I told you, there are 3 pillars: no tillage, cover crops, rotational agriculture. This is very easy to control using remote sensing techniques to check if the farmer is tilling his land or not, if they're using cover crops, and if it's never producing the same crop year after year. This is very easy to control. You don't even not to disturb the farmers. You just have to get the remote sensing data and develop a program, and the program can check if all of those aspects are respected. If it is so, well, you can say this farmer is working on this. But if you do so, what will happen after? When you are producing in conservation agriculture process, it means that one year you will produce wheat, another one you will produce meat, maize, for instance, or soya or whatever. The rotational things made that you cannot produce one year the same quantity of wheat every year, for instance. So you have to rotate among your plots. And it means that the people that will purchase all the product from you to sell on the market will need to be able to handle all the variety of food that you will, of grain that you will give him. It means that you need also to make the difference between the one coming from your plot and the one coming from the next door farmers, which is in conventional. So if you mix the wheat coming from the conservation and the wheat coming from the conventional agriculture, then there will be no added value to your production. So it means that the consumer need to know that the produce they are producing is coming from this conservation agriculture, which is more respect more the nature than the other one. It means that even though you control that this farmer is really producing the right way, you need to have a traceability of the whole production up to the consumer. And this will cost money also. The whole process, if you want to control the whole process and give the guarantee to the consumer that he's purchasing the right product, is quite costly, and the consumer need to be able to pay a premium for all the system. But it could be also done the other way, say, okay, let's enforce a law telling that, well, tillage is, I'm not just dreaming, tillage is forbidden. So it means that all the farmers will avoid tillage. And it means that maybe we'll be able to store carbon in the soil through that process. that's an extreme way to avoid certification, but to prove that the farmers are doing the right job. I'm not sure that will be a solution for our problem, because I like the freedom of the farmers and I like the freedom of the consumer to choose the products they want. But I just explained to you that certification is not the only way we can handle this question. But if we want the people to be able to choose the right product, we will need to have a kind of traceability of all the products from the farmers to the consumer. And this could be developed, implemented by the government, for instance.
Okay. Just a question related to the rotation of crops. You said that the rotation of crops is mandatory from a year to another, and it is a barrier to get a certification. However, if we take the example of Masanobu Fukuoka, he used to grow rice every year using permaculture methods and therefore without rotating his crops. He was in fact growing each year several types of crops like rice and wheat all together.
You can, but most of the time this happens at a small level. There is another concept which is small is beautiful. Yes, small is beautiful because it's diverse. In that aspect, you can use it because you are mixing some crops. You can improve organic matter. The straw of the weed of the rice will remain in the field. You avoid tilling and so on. And I mean, it's a mixture of practice that could work at a small scale. The thing is that if you want to develop that at a larger scale, you need to develop all the techniques that will be able to be handled with the tractor and with the people and so on. So the problem most of the time is the scalability of the whole things. Permaculture is a beautiful idea. It's really something that is closer to the nature. But develop at a large scale is very difficult. That's the main problem. And that is why we need to, science needs to help us a lot to develop the understanding of those systems and what could be used for the more larger way for the farmers to be able to apply those methods in order to be as productive as they are, but also preserve the environment the right way.
Okay, and for the traceability, why is it more difficult to do the traceability of crops coming from regenerative or permaculture methods compared to organic? What's the difference?
Well, there are no difference, but one is certified, the other one is not. So it links to your question before. But if you want to have the diversity of production, for instance, people working in conservation agriculture, people working in organic or biodynamic, people working in regenerative agriculture, in agroforestry, if you want to have a traceability for each product, you can imagine all those energy that you will need. So, of course, certification will solve the problem, but it has a cost, as I explained to you before. It's not only traceability, it's the whole process which is certified. Knowing where it comes from, it's one subject. Knowing which way it was produced, it's another one. And that's all the matter of the certification. But I'm not saying that it's impossible. We can do that. Instead of having a huge amount of subsidy going in for the farmers who are not doing the right thing in the conventional, we can use part of this subsidy to building some certifying model or paying people to being sure that all what we propose are doing in the field. Well, it could be done. So that's what I said. The responsibility is in the end of the government also, because they are the one who enforce the law and develop the rules. So if we can do that, we can maybe find some solution using public money to do so.
And just regarding one point also that you mentioned, you said that it's permaculture is difficult to scale, but maybe one precision is that for sure permaculture is difficult to scale if our goal is to produce as much volumes of food or textiles as we are doing today. But I think that the philosophy of permaculture is different because they also promote a sort of sobriety. Like, for example, maybe we don't need to eat all type of fruits and vegetables all year round that come from the other side of the planet. So if we are in a scenario where we are not producing those same volumes of food, maybe it's more an appropriate answer. And there is also this problem of food waste, because 30% of food production is wasted anyway. So maybe we don't need to produce as much volume. And if permaculture doesn't aim to produce the same volumes that we have today from the conventional agriculture, I think it's a very different philosophy at the first place. Because permaculture it doesn't want to become the industrial way to produce food that will be sold at the other side of the planet. The idea behind is local and resilient food production systems.
I agree with you, Lamia, but well, we need to be realistic in one hand. If you look at the world, take the example of France, you ask question in the street to the people, do you prefer organic agriculture or do you prefer conventional agriculture for your food? People will 100% say, oh, I prefer organic agriculture. Okay, follow those people and look where they are shopping. They are going in the supermarket, and they are going most of the time in the low-cost supermarket. I mean, and they will look at the price of all the things, and they will purchase the cheapest. Okay? There is a lack of logic behind that. Part of the population in developing country and developed country are thinking, okay, we need to decrease our quantity of consumption. And for instance, we don't need to purchase clothes every month. We can use the same clothes from one year to another, keep it for long, and so on. Look at the development of those phenomena on internet about a Chinese company, I don't want to give the name, which is promoting the fact to purchase the fast, yes, all the clothes are very cheap. You can get it immediately, and you can use a huge quantity of clothes with a small amount of money. But this is done on the back of the small people in China that make the old clothes very, very, very quickly for almost nothing. All the materials are produced in a very bad condition, and the quality of the whole thing is not so nice. And on the top of that, all the creativity of the people everywhere in the world are just used because the people take the picture. Oh, this is nice. I copy it and I sell it for nothing. But the people who create that got no remuneration for his creativity. So, but this is a model that most of the society is going. So when you are talking about permaculture, to those people, they just go to the fast food, they go to the fast shop to get all those clothes and the life. And well, you need to, the main subject is education. If you bring that to the brain of the people from the very early stage, they will take care of it. But we need to do a lot of work at the level of our society. So I would say, if you want to change the whole system, you cannot change it as a whole. If we can go step by step, I am a person of the step-by-step process. Let's make conventional agriculture disappear and move towards at least conservation agriculture. We have some default, but also a lot of quality. Organic agriculture, holistic grazing system. Just do a little bit of that. We will save a lot of money. We will save a lot of forest. We will store carbon in the soil. We will have less impact on biodiversity, less impact on the climate change, and so on and so on. And people will have the impression that their life didn't change. Okay? We will have the same production for the industry to produce and so on. So, but that will be a huge change.
Yeah.
And if the people want to develop permaculture, whatever they can, because they have the capacity, they have the knowledge, they have the market for that, okay, go for it. No problem.
So if you had to advise countries or governments, what steps should they take to transition from conventional agriculture to agroecology?
First of all, I would say we need to be sure that the people that are governing all countries in the world are aware of what is agroecology, what is the advantage, and why they need to go for it. I'm not sure 100% of the government of the world are aware of that. So increasing the awareness is the most important work, and that's a large part of our work in the 4PMI initiative, but not only for the government. Other things very important is that conventional agriculture, as I explained before, is coming from science, is coming from industry. And agroecology is a disturbing concept for them because, no, it's true, because agroecological practices are coming from the farmers themselves. While we were in the top-down situation with the Green Revolution and the conventional agriculture, we are now in the bottom-up situation with agroecology, and even a peer-to-peer communication between farmers, which is the most difficult things to handle for science and for industry. Because if you are an industry, and if you need a product to process, you say, okay, I want my supply chain to be 100% in agroecology. Okay, great. When you say that, you say to the farmers, okay, guys, go for agroecology. But I explained to you, agroecology is a complex process and a complex context. So the farmers will say, okay, do you want us to be organic? Do you want us to be conservation? Do you want us to be regenerative? What are the tools we have? Where we can get the advice? Where we can get the technology? Where we can get the economical accompaniment to go with it, to the transition? I mean, the industry has no solution for that. And the government as well. And science does not have no recipe to build on to develop agroecology. So you see, the challenge we are facing for that is really complex and huge. So first of all, we need to collect all the practices that are under the agroecology and make it available for all the farmers all over the world. Because one farmer's already find a solution in a agro-pedoclimatic condition and socio-economic condition. For him, he finds that solution can suit another farmers on the other side of the world. And at the time, in our period of internet power, I mean, we are able to develop tools that could help farmers to find solution to their own problem. We need also to have science to explain why this is working, why we are storing carbon in the soil doing that, why soil is in better health if we do that. So we need to develop all the MRV behind that. How we can measure all of that. How we can be sure that when we store carbon, this is permanent, this is not temporary. Because it's easy to plant a tree because we can see the tree growing and we know that in the stem of the tree, carbon will be stored. That is why forest is so easy to develop if we want to compensate. While agriculture is also very powerful, but when you look at the soil, you will never see the carbon in the soil like that. It's not obvious. You need to measure it. That is the difficulty. But the permanency of the carbon in the soil is the same than in the forest. If you plow, the carbon will disappear in the soil. If you crash the matches on the forest, you set the fire, all your carbon will disappear at once. The permanency is not existing more in the forest than in the soil. It's just a problem of practice. Need to be clear on that. So practices, accompaniment of the farmers, technically, economically, how we can pay the transition. Most of the time, when you transit from conventional to agroecology, you will have a drop in the yield for a while until your system find the balance, your soil recover good soil health, and then during that period of time, you need to give the means to the farmers to be able for him and his family or her and family to live. So you need to recognize that. You need to enforce the law, the rules that are favorable to the development of those agriculture. Of course, If you need certification, well, you need to develop a certification process. If you need to develop the traceability, the rule need to be clear for everybody and you can respect the rule. If you want to tax the product that are coming from another country, which is not produced on the right way, and if your consumer consider that it is important, then you can put a tax at the entrance of your country telling, okay, those products are produced against environment. This is the cost of the environment that you add to the product, and the product will come the same price than the one produced on your market under the agroecology, because you are respecting the environment. You have many, many ways to do so, and all the governments can have all this in hand and take the right decision. But coming back to my first point, you need to develop the awareness of all of that. And of course, you need to give the way for the consumer to find the product they want. So if you look today on the market and look for bread made out of wheat coming from conservation agriculture, you will not be able to find it. So if it exists such a label to certify that this is coming from the right field, then the producer will be able to choose that product, as they are doing for the organic product today. So you need to give the means to the consumer to take the right decision. There are work going on at the moment to a kind of global certification question about, well, a mixture of considering how the vegetal production is made, how the animal production is made, how it's processed, and altogether you give a kind of index of the product. So if the index is, for instance, A, then you can purchase in interest. If it's B, this is good, but not enough. C, it's a little bit not so good. D is starting to be good, not good. And E is really very bad. So if you want to purchase it, you can purchase it. Nobody will prevent you to do so. But you know that this is not a very good product for the environment, for the soil, and so on. If you are if you are sensitive to that, you can purchase the right product. That could be a very simple thing to do so. Such a system could exist and already exist. It should be developed. It's not kind of certification. It's just a control of what all the people from the producer to the supermarket or the shop is doing to bring you that product to you. So this is an example of steps that need to be followed. But of course, I'm not exhaustive. I'm forgetting a lot of things. The role of science is important. The role of farmers is important. The role of consumer and civil society is important. The role of the business is important because they are the one who can control their supply chain and really change the things. And of course, the role of the government, international organization is very important to make all of that possible and discussing at the international level to avoid bad things and to promote good things, to be simplistic.
Okay, so yeah, okay, so to summarize, we would need to train farmers at large scale to help them learn the agroecology practices. And for that, if they transition, the government somehow would need to help them economically, because there is a transition during 3-4 years, maybe they will have a drop in their yield. And so they will need to be economically.
They may have a drop.
They may have.
Two other things. First, not only we have to train farmers, but we have to listen to them, because as I told you, the knowledge is in their hand most of the time. And secondly, the society needs to recognize the benefit that they get from the agricultural practice, from the right agricultural practice. So all the environmental services provided by farmers need to be recognized and paid for with public money or private money through the compensation. This is very important also. Involve the farmers in the whole process. And not talking about the co-decision, talking about the inclusiveness of the governance and so on. Well, all of that are linked. But in fact, it's all by the fact that the farmers need to be in the center of all and need to be considered and need to be listened and need to be helped altogether.
And you also mentioned about there is also the supply chain which is controlled at the first place by companies, and so companies also have an important role in this transition. So any recommendation maybe for them?
Well, it's very interesting because large companies are talking more and more about regenerative agriculture for their supply chain, the same that the large NGOs. That's make us feeling that if the large environmental NGOs are using the same word that the large company in the world, or we are going towards a very beautiful world, or they are not talking about the same thing. And we find out that they are not talking about the same thing.
No. They're not.
So I would like to be optimistic, but sometimes I need to be pragmatic and realistic. So that is why we, in the 4 per Mille initiative, we try to contribute to have an harmonized definition of what is regenerative agriculture in order for all the people to understand the same thing. And our scientific and technical committee proposed a definition. It's on our website, and facilitating the dialogue. Because most of the time when companies are talking about regenerative agriculture, they are in fact talking about conservation agriculture. So that is why it's so important to understand what is behind each word that we are using in order to be sure that we are talking the same language. And this is one of our rules in the 4 per Mille initiative, to make the people more aware of all of that and being able to speak the same language.
So do you think agroecology can feed the world?
I'm convinced that agroecology can feed the world, as far as you understand agroecology as a continuum of various agriculture, and not as a unique recipe that you can apply everywhere. The problem is with agroecology is the understanding of that word. If you look at the international level and the work done by FAO, a very important work, they produce a report on trying to explain what is agroecology. This is 120 pages of document that could bring information, a lot of information. But if I was a farmer and I received that book and people told me, okay, please develop agroecology at your level, I will be completely lost. That is why we consider that it was important to try to explain simply what is agroecology, in order for the farmers and all the people in the world being able to say, okay, well, I understand that when I am producing in organic way, this is agroecology. Great. This is maybe not the most beautiful way of producing things, food in the agroecology, but it's part of the agroecology. And if I can do it organic today, maybe tomorrow I can be regenerative. And I'm going towards in that direction. That's what I need. And if a farmers in conventional decided that, well, now I understand what is conservation agriculture, it seems to be interesting, not very far from what I'm doing, I can move towards that, and I will enter into the agroecology. It seems to be simple, but when the people understand really each word, they will be able to know what to do and where to find the advice to go in that direction.
Okay, thank you. So any word of conclusion for this interview?
Well, I would say that my main word to conclude that interview would be hope. We can do it. And well, I can try to paraphrase what was saying a previous president in the US. Yes, we can. We can change the world. We can change what's going on in climate change aspect. We can change the erosion of biodiversity. We can change the way the desertification is progressing. We can change the food security aspect of the world. We can use agroecology for that. We need to have hope, faith somewhere, and trust what the farmers are doing and what we can propose to them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul, for all the insights that you shared with us today. And thank you, everyone, for watching us. Thank you.
Bye-bye.